Welcome, everybody. Thanks for coming. As Mark already said, today I'm going to tell you a little bit about our ants. And basically, my whole lab studies ants. So that's maybe a little bit unusual. But in fact, it turns out we're not only studying ants, but we're also studying the ants' pets. Because it turns out, and that's what I'll tell you today about a little bit, is that ants also have pets that live inside the ant nest with them. And here you can see one. That's just a cartoon. But let's get going. So when I tell people that I study ants, often they ask me which ones I study, the red ones or the black ones. And that's usually what people know about ants. And they think that the red ants and the black ants, they fight. And that's kind of the two types of ants that you have, right? But it's actually not true. Actually, there are many ants. There are some ants that have mustaches. And there's some ants that even look like Darth Vader. And there are many, many, many more ants. There's some ants with really, really big eyes. And there's some ants that don't have any eyes. And there are black ants, like this one, and there are blue ants, and there are red ants, and there are brown ants, and there are even golden ants with like really big, sparkly silver eyes. So there's many, many ants. In fact, there are more than 13,000 different types of ants in the world. That's more different types of ants than, say, different types of birds, for example. There are just many of them. And ants are very important. If you went to a rainforest, say in the Amazon, and you would take all the ants from the Amazon, and you put them on a scale, and on the other side of the scale, you would take all the big mammals, like the jaguars, and the pigs, and the monkeys, and also the birds, and the frogs, and the snakes, and everything, all the big animals. The ants would be much heavier than the big animals, at least 4 to 5 times as heavy as the big animals. So they're just everywhere. And actually what we do, among other things, is we go to Costa Rica, and that's where we study a certain type of ants in the tropical rainforest. So here we go, starting in New York, the concrete jungle of New York, straight to Costa Rica. And that's what it looks like. So this is the rainforest in Costa Rica, and this is where we walk around and we look for ants. And besides the ants, of course, they're like really cool big animals. There's howler monkeys, there's macaws. You can hear them here. That's what it sounds like when we walk around in the rainforest. But of course, what I really want to tell you about today is not the big animals that you hear about so a lot, but I want to tell you about the little ants that are actually much more important than the big animals, I think. So the ants that we study are called army ants. And the cool thing, or one cool thing about army ants is that they hunt in really, really big groups. So army ant colonies, they can have up to 1 million individual ants inside a colony. And what they do is they make like big carpet swarm raids on the forest floor with maybe 500,000 to sometimes up to 1 million ants in this carpet of ants. And they move through the forest on the floor, and they attack everything that they can find, basically. Everything that can't escape fast enough from the ants is being attacked. And because there are so many, they can attack really big animals, at least big compared to the ants. So here you see they are attacking a katydid, some kind of a grasshopper, if you wish. And you see that there are many of them, right? So some bite in the antenna, some bite in the legs. And that way they can pin down really big animals. And then what they do is they kind of chop them up, and they carry them back to their nest. What they also do is they attack other ants. They're very good at that, too. And here you see them fight with another type of ant. So these are our army ants, and here are other smaller ants that are being attacked by the army ants. And they often then kind of invade the nests of other ants, and they steal the brood from the other ants and eat those too. And this is Christoph. He's working in my lab, so we go down to Costa Rica together to study these ants. And you can see that Christoph is wearing really high rubber boots, and he's sitting on this chair so that the ants have a harder time to come up and attack him. Because you have to imagine that the carpet is somewhere over here where the ants are hunting. So of course we don't want to get too close to the ants, at least most of the time. And this is what it looks like when they come back from the swarm raid and they carry their prey items back to the nest. So here you can see one ant that is carrying, I think it's probably a leg of a cockroach or something like this. So as I told you before, they attack these big animals, and then they chop them up into smaller pieces that they can carry, and then they carry them back to the nest, like this ant here. And the nest is actually pretty fascinating. So you know maybe that most ants, they have like nests in the soil, and all you see on top is like a little hole where the ants come in and go out. But these ants here, they have a different type of nest. They make their nest or their house in which they live out of the ants themselves. So what you see here is a big clump that consists of live ants, and that clump is suspended from a fallen tree trunk here in the forest. And this is maybe like 1 million ants in here or something. And you can see all these little dots are individual ants that make up the sphere of ants that forms the nest. And they not only make up the nest on the outside, but they make little tunnels and brood chambers inside that nest. And all of that is like lined by the live bodies of the ants. So it's really kind of a living architecture. And what they do is, because they're such good hunters, basically during the day they hunt, they form these swarm raids, and they kill everything that's around the nest. And that means that at night, the whole nest, this whole structure here comes down, and the ants move the whole nest to a different place, about 150 meters or something, on the forest floor at night, and then they form the nest again, and during the day they hunt somewhere else. They kill everything again, and then they move on. So they're kind of these really predatory, nomadic ants, if you wish. So this is what it looks like when they move the nest, what I just told you. And this is now in the middle of the night, so we have to go to the forest at night, and we have to see where the ants actually are going so that we can find them again the next day. So here you can see them on one of their moving columns, or their moving trails, and you see that the ants are carrying their own larvae now. This is not the larvae of other ants or other insects, that's their own young, their own little baby larvae, their little baby ants, if you wish. And here's another picture of such a moving trail. And you can see that up here, that's a different kind of ant. It's from the same species, from the same colony, but it looks very different, right? This one up here. You can see that it has these really big mouth parts. And these ants, they just stand on the side of the moving column, of the immigration trail, and they're there to defend the colony against bigger animals, like maybe birds or mammals that would possibly come and attack the ants. And you can see here, this is now, it's sitting on my finger, and you can see that it's very effective at defending against bigger animals like myself. Right here, you can see it's biting me. And they also have a pretty strong sting, so they can sting you as well. It pretty hurts. One is not so bad, but once you're too close and you get stung by a few, or maybe sometimes 100, it's pretty painful. And then if you sit there long enough, so, and these kind of the ants, when they're moving the nest, it can take a long time. It can take sometimes 8 to 10 hours. And usually we sit there and we watch the entire moving party go past. So we sit in the forest at night, sometimes for 8 hours or so. And at some point, when you sit there long enough, you'll see that more and more of these soldiers that I just showed you, that are showing up, right? So usually they're pretty rare, but here you can see already like 5 or 6 of these big ant soldiers that are guarding the trail. And that's always a good sign of that something really important is going to happen. And what's happening is that the queen is coming. I don't know if you can see here, but in the colony there's one queen, and the one queen is the mother of all the ants in the colony. She's the one that lays all the eggs, that gives rise to all the larvae, all the baby ants that have been carried before. So she's really important to the colony. If she dies, then the whole colony dies. So she's very, very well protected, and she has this entourage of soldiers that always travel with her. So you can see here, she's a little bit difficult to see, but one night I was brave enough and I grabbed her, and here she is, a little bit better isolated, and you can see that she's really big. She's much, much bigger than the other ants that are in the colony, even much bigger than the soldier ants. So as I said, she's really, really important. And now, here you can see her moving past, and now you can't see her at all. So here I fired one photograph flash, and then all the soldiers come and they go on top of her and protect her. And then this whole ball of ants basically moves and disappears into the forest. So she's extremely well protected. So that's pretty exciting when you see the ant queen pass by. But the other cool thing is that there's, every now and then, so you sit there the whole night, 8 hours, and there's always ants running past you, running past you. At some point you get to a point when you close your eyes, all you see is ants. It's like a stream of ants that goes and goes, you go crazy. But if you manage to stay focused, what's really cool is sometimes you see that there's something else running in these emigration columns that is not an ant, obviously. Here you see like a beetle. And that's the main reason why we sit there 8 hours every night. Because we're interested also in the ants, but also a lot in these kind of guys. So what's going on here? Essentially what it is that the ants have pets inside their nests. They have other animals that live inside the ant colony. So a little bit like we have pets too. So who has pets of you? I'm sure many have pets. What kind of pets do you have? What kind of pet do you have? A dog and a cat and chickens. Chickens, that's a cool pet. What do you have? 2 cats. Cats are, more cats. One cat. And another dog. Ah, only dog and cats? Who has something else? What do you have? A what? A hermit crab? That's a cool pet. And you in the back? A hamster? Oh, cool. So there are many pets. Dogs. Oh yeah, now you're getting more excited about the dogs than the ants. That wasn't my intention. Dogs and hamsters. Yeah, I know. Goldfish, rabbits, cats, and tarantulas. Nobody has a tarantula? Ah. Well, okay. But so we have many pets, right? Turns out the ants have many pets too. And now, this is a picture, again, of one of these columns of the ants moving in the forest. Can you see there's one on there that's actually not an ant? It's actually not that easy to see. It's actually very difficult to see. Do you know where it is? Where is it? Yeah?
It's where, like, right in the top, but it's right there.
This one?
Yeah.
No. That's the soldier ant. This one looks very different from the other ants, right? This is the one that bit my finger. The one that is there for protection. The one that's different is actually right beneath the soldier ant. It's very difficult to see. This little thing here. Can you see that it looks different? I took it out and I magnified it, and you can see that it's not an ant. It's actually a beetle. But it looks quite a lot like the ants, right? And there are different ways, and that's basically what we study. We study how these pets of the ants can live inside the ant colonies without being attacked by the ants, and how they kind of integrate, how they live with the ants, what exactly the interactions are, and how that evolves. Because it turns out that these pets do very different things. So for example, this beetle here is very good at looking like the ants, right? If you just watch the ants pass by, they're very, very difficult to see. They have the same color as the ants, they walk in the same way, they even have a little bit like the body shape of the ants. So that's one very good way how you can live inside ant colonies. But there are other ways. This one here, for example, looks very strange, right? But it's a beetle as well. And this beetle also, it walks at night in these emigration columns and moves with the ants, 150 meters over the forest floor. And that's something that's very common as well. So these beetles, they look a little bit like drops. So they're like these drop-shaped. And the reason is that if you're drop-shaped and you're very, very smooth, it's very difficult for the ants to grab you and to attack you. And you can also see that they have tiny, tiny little legs and tiny, tiny antennae, and they can tuck those under this kind of horseshoe crabbed body shape. And then the ants have a very hard time attacking them. So usually the ants don't attack them, but sometimes if the beetle behaves in a strange way, the ants figure out that it's something else actually, and they get aggressive and they try to attack it. And then this beetle is very well protected. Here again, I took it out so you can see it a little bit better. That's something that happens a lot, not only in beetles. This one here is a bristletail, and the bristletail also walks inside the columns of the ants and lives inside the ant nest and moves with the ants every night. And you can see that it looks kind of similar to the beetle. It's a very, very different animal, actually. It's as different as you can be if you're an insect. But it looks very similar. The color is kind of similar, and especially the body shape is very similar. So that's another good way to be able to live inside ant colonies. And then there's another way. What you can see here is a tiny little beetle that is able to clip itself onto the ant, and it rides on the ant. So sometimes you see an ant come by in this column at night, and you think, that's strange, it looks kind of different. The color is a little bit different, and you pick it up, and you see that it has a little beetle clamped basically to its back. The beetle looks a little bit like the ant's butt, right? So it's actually very difficult to see. And you can see that it's very good at retracting its legs, a little bit like the beetle I showed you before that had this drop-shaped. Here you can see the beetle, again, like magnified. And you can see that it has legs. It looks like kind of like a normal beetle, but when it's on the ants, it's really like a little tank. It tucks everything under its body, so it can't be attacked by the ants. And it's very firmly attached to the ant. Another way is that you can, of course, be really, really small, so the ants don't even really know that you're there. So what you see here is a little mite. Can you see it? Here it is. And this is, again, a soldier ant. It has these really, really big mouth parts that are very good at biting me and other bigger animals. And this particular kind of mite you only find on the inside of the mandible of the big soldier. So it's extremely specialized. And if you look carefully, you can see that it even has the same kind of hairs on its surface that the soldier has on its mandible. Can you see that? It's extremely, extremely well adapted into this kind of little niche that it has carved out for itself here. Even as a beetle, you can be extremely small. This is a little beetle here, down here. You see that? It's next to a dime. So you can see how tiny it really is. And this is a beetle that rides at night on the pupae that the ants are carrying, or the little larvae that the ants are carrying. So it's very difficult to see, basically, but you see the ants carrying by their larvae. The larvae are white, and then every now and then there's a larva that has a little black dot on it. And it's these kind of beetles. They're tiny. So of course, if you're that small, the ants are not going to notice you, really. So what we do in Costa Rica is we go there and we study how these interactions between the ants and their pets evolve, and what it means for the ants, and what it means for all the pets that the ants have, in terms of ecology, in terms of biodiversity, and so on. Okay, so then we fly back to New York. And it turns out that you don't really have to go to Costa Rica to find these cool ants and the pets of the ants. You can go somewhere very close to here. So our university has the Center for Field Research a little bit up the Hudson in New York State. It's a very nice area with these like big lakes and very beautiful woods. And we go there with my lab every now and then, and as Mark already said, we flip over rocks and we see what's under the rocks. And that's what you can see here, some people from the lab flipping over rocks. And see, they're all getting very excited. Because what they're finding is another ant colony. These ants are very different. And if you go to our ant booth that we have over in the CRC building, you'll see a colony of those in an ant farm. But usually they live under rocks in the soil. They're very yellow. And this is, again, their own brood, their young larvae. So they're kind of their baby ants that they're carrying around. But if you look carefully, you'll notice that there's something else in the nest, too. They have these white aphids, they're called. And what the aphids do, it's the aphids, they sit on the roots of plants, and they drink the sap from the plants that they suck from the roots. And then some of that sap, the aphids digest themselves, and a little bit they excrete. And the ants basically harvest this excretion. It's very sugar-rich. It's like drinking lemonade, basically, from the aphids. So that's why the ants keep the aphids. Sometimes they also kill them, and they eat the aphids. But what the ants provide for the aphids is protection. So the ants are very, very good at protecting the aphids. So as soon as you flip over this rock to look for ants, and there are aphids and ants, the ants will immediately grab the aphids and carry them underground. So they're very, very good at protecting the aphids against anything else that might come along. So if you wish, it's a little bit like humans keeping cows, maybe. So the ants really keep an animal where they can get something like milk from, and every now and then they kill some of them and eat them. So a little bit like we do with cows. So it's a very similar kind of farming interaction between ants and other animals. So this is a quote from a very famous ant biologist, Ed Wilson, and I'll just read it to you. He's kind of old now, he's in his 80s. I've never changed, not even to this day as I pass through my 80s. Encountering creatures in unexplored lands is the magic I still conjure in my dreams. The inner feelings remain the same. I did not let them be smothered by the trivial necessities of life, and I hope that whatever path you choose, neither will you. And I hope what I could show you today is that there's a lot of unexplored lands out there. You can go to Costa Rica and you can find these little things that live inside ant colonies that nobody really knows much about. You can find new species, and you can find new interactions and new behaviors that nobody has really known. And they're very fascinating. But you don't even have to go to Costa Rica. You can start flipping over rocks in your backyard or maybe the park, and you'll find ants there and other really fascinating animals. And they often have behaviors that we don't know. So it turns out that some of these aphids at our field center seem to be new species that nobody knew existed. So there's a lot of things to explore, and I hope you'll take a part in that. And before I stop, I wanted to show you two pictures of the two people that mostly work on the ant pets in my lab. So this is Christoph, who I go to Costa Rica with every now and then to collect the army ants. Here you see him standing on one of these tree giants. Actually, the ants had made their nest up here in the tree, this big sphere of ants that was hanging somewhere up here, and we were like trying to figure out where exactly it is. And this is Anik, who works at the field center, and she studies the ants and how they interact with the aphids. And if you're here a little bit longer, you can go to our ant booth, which is on the second floor of the CRC. And Romain, another person in my lab, another researcher, he's there, and he'll tell you much more about ants. And I'll stop by as well. If you have questions, you can ask me. We have some ant farms there and some little movies and a lot of things to tell you about. So I hope you'll enjoy Science Saturday, and thanks for coming.